Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Let's dive into the daily market recap for the session. So it's been a pretty exciting session. Yesterday was quite literally the opposite. So a little bit more to talk about today. Just in review, some playbook trades. So starting with USO, we basically had a really nice opportunity at a reversion trade today. Now I would say to summarize this, we could maybe do another call or something and take more questions if you guys want to dive through this a little bit deeper. But what I would point to on this is one a good example of an idea trade. It's more of a narrative trade where the thesis is very strong in terms of the expectation of potential moves. So it's not your typical, just setup that you see building in the market or in an individual name. This had to do a lot with the narrative going on. And I shared my thoughts in the commentary about this trade and what was going through my mind. So I'd encourage everyone to look through that. But the main point is I was just citing the way the markets acted around the administration's, attempts to make deals. And we can refer back to multiple different occasions, and the tariff lows were, one of the best use cases for this. And then it's important to know that history doesn't repeat itself, it just rhymes. So, the markets, as we've seen and kind of talked about over the last several weeks, have sort of discounted a lot of the headlines. And I think that's a lot of what we've been seeing. They know the playbook, right? They know that Trump will really test and push things to certain extremes before resolution is made. And you were kind of seeing, I feel, over the last several weeks, that sort of play out in the way that the market was really resilient at first to kind of shake off certain headlines. And then also just once we got into the last couple of sessions, almost just very callous to headlines. We're just seeing the market basically tell us it doesn't really uh, care as much until we get something a little bit more certain. And aside from just normal quick moves, we've seen a lot of headlines get shaken off in either direction. And I think that has a lot to do with the market, knowing that we have to wait till we get to a point of extreme and trying to determine what that point of extreme actually is. And that has largely been uncertain, which is, I think, a lot of the reason for the type of price action that we've got. Now, going into today, we have a very extreme deadline, right? Like it's a very serious threat, not to be taken lightly. And we here at TWI, aren't going to get political with things, but the importance of it is a very serious threat. Um, that is not too surprising from the administration, I would say, but it is a very, very clear, final hand being played. That was the discernment in this trade that I think is important to understand why I had the conviction, if you're wondering, in the opportunity. Now, what can be challenging is when you build a strong thesis in a trade based on whatever narrative, and of course, there's always odds that you're just dead wrong, right? And I acknowledge that. This idea could be just early, could be wrong, but we have a deadline that we know about. So the known deadline helped with that conviction for me being tonight. The odds that we saw more headlines throughout the session extremely high, right? Because time is of the essence. Okay, so the point that I was basically making is the bet I'm willing to take and was willing to take is that Trump doesn't want to see the markets just crater, right? And at the end of the day, regardless of what he's actually saying, what his actions have shown, especially through the tariff fiasco that we had, at the end of the day, we kind of know the playbook. He wants things to work out well for the market, regardless, politics aside and all that. So with that being said, that's why I leaned on that side. I had a bias toward the upside because of that. And once we sold into some key supports, you saw me take, an attempt here. That was a break-even trade, and then attempted it here that ended up failing, but came back at the end of the day. So the idea was essentially just S&P long, USO short, and USO was the big trade. Now, what I was getting to is that what can be challenging about these types of trades, these narrative trades, these position trades, if you will, is finding a signal. And this is an area that I've gotten better at, probably could still improve at. But you have a strong thesis, you have a strong narrative, you still need a signal for the trade to try and make sure you're not getting caught too early. And even still, with a lot of patience off the open, you can see I ended up getting caught a little early on this first entry. Now, I was willing to stick to my guns on this trade because I just wasn't convinced. And this is discretion, to be clear. Could have just blown up, but I would have had to cut fairly quickly. if I was wrong. But this speed up, I just want to kind of call out the reason I held. The speed up here is often a really good indication of something topping or bottoming. Okay, so when I saw that, I was like, okay, I need to give this a minute because this could actually be the look above and fail that I was waiting for. So we had this pre-market high, we got a trap below, and then that's when I started to get short with some confidence. Okay, so my signal was actually good. Did wait for a signal. It just turned out that there ended up being a better one, and it's not surprising because USO has just been incredibly resilient on dips and really resilient to headlines. It was going to take a pretty serious headline to get this to really move, which even still, with the headlines we got, it took a lot to take this thing down. So our timing was right, our thesis was right, and we got paid really nicely on USO with some size today. The risk reward against this trade made it really good. I used discretion to wait and not use high day as a stop. It's a completely discretionary decision. And, for me, I'm a price action trader, and sometimes you'll see me do that. So I'm just following the price, and there are risks to that and taking a bigger loss, but that's just what it is. Um, and then obviously this played out throughout the session, and then we got this huge wick lower. It's really, really unfortunate this didn't hold. If this would have held, then it would have been a massive opportunity. But you can kind of see where and why my conviction was the way it was. I knew that this was something that could happen today because we had that deadline. All right. So nonetheless, worked out good, paid very well, made a good amount of money, and everybody's happy. Now, outside of that, S&P did offer some opportunities. This was a really nice short. So we caught a nice bounce off of this. This was a gamma pivot. Did take some partial profit and then got stopped out, kind of an equal percentage loss, which made it a break-even trade. If you're fast enough, which we called out, flipping to puts paid well, right? This ended up playing out really well. And then once we put in this failed breakdown here at 65.56, I went long again. That ended up failing. I held on because I always will size S&P with what I'm willing to risk to zero. I do use stops, but often am fine, holding a little bit longer just because I'm sizing to zero almost always on SPX personally. This ended up playing out as we know. We had 65, 33, 32 support that ended up holding. As well, I was kind of hanging out for a minute to see if it would hold. Then we ended up getting a couple headlines, and lots of headlines, and end up going higher, and we're able to take a profit. So what I would say is this short was a nice, opportunity. The failed breakdown was good. It just failed. Well, that is a playbook trade. And then you got kind of this turn off the headline back through 65.56. So this is more of a reclaim. So a couple different opportunities there. Was it all easy? Definitely not. These are playbook setups, and they did set up entries, but certainly not easy to trade. It would be hindsight to say otherwise. All right, NBIS, nice breakout. So this rejected 114 on the daily. You can see 114's importance. Big level to get back above. All right, so basically we did shoot up at the open and then reject that. Had a pretty big rejection off of that level, based a bit, and then once the market got going, you finally got through it. So the second attempt through, or even third on this turn, I thought was a pretty nice opportunity. All right, that's what we got in review, and I think we've said enough about where the market's at. There's really not a whole lot to talk about technically here because we have a potential ceasefire. The U.S. has to agree to it. I haven't seen a headline that we have agreed to it. The last headline I saw is that a deal is expected to close between the U.S. and Iran tonight. So really, technicals don't matter here. We just need to see what happens in the futures market. As for watch list into tomorrow, a little bit of the same kind of vibe, right? I mean, we can talk about some charts, but it really isn't going to matter until we see what futures do. So S&P through 66.31. I'm just going to go through this quick. USO, we had that huge wick, so really not looking at this 131. Actually, would rather look at this 136, but it likely gaps anyways. So we'll look at the edges of this. AMD, a nice technical chart. It's been holding well on dips. This is the now third attempt to really break through and start a new trend. So I like AMD a lot. MRVL, so you can kind of see the theme of semis and chips. Marvell, another one. Really, really strong breakout recently. Rejected this 111.50 spot and pulled back a bit. Bit of a digestion day today, but held the dip. And if we can get through that spot, look for some momentum up to 120 next. SNDK next because it's in the same theme. Nice failed breakdown at 700. We kind of called that out as a possibility. This morning. Certainly not clean, really kind of messy chart, but closed well. It basically held its own after failing to move higher yesterday. Now we want to see it run through 736 and in a hurry too. If we can get that type of move or even a gap with the market, I think this is getting set up for a bigger squeeze. XOM, if we get a bigger move down in oil, this 159.60 is super defined. So it just stands out to me. It's a pretty clear breakdown spot if we end up reaching that level. That's what I got for you guys today. Hope the review was helpful. If you have any questions, as always, let me know. It should be an exciting session tomorrow. So I'll see you then.